So hey guys, welcome to our new series What If Naruto and Cynthia Were Couples, and in this video we are doing crossover of Naruto and Pokemon. If you like this type of content, so don't forget to like and subscribe our channel, and let's get started.
Celestic Town. It was a beautiful morning in Celestic. Pokemon were happily running around accompanied by their trainers and partners and sometimes the latter's significant other and offspring. In this town we find a small, but well-kept Pokemon daycare, PDC. The PDC was a small establishment for locals and sometimes travelers to let their Pokemon relax and mingle with other Pokemon in a peaceful environment free of risks. A certain ex-champions and her wife's Pokemon made sure of that. One could also call it a Pokemon resort. You could entrust your Pokemon to the PDC for as long as you like, though you must give some sort of identification and insurance that you will come back for your Pokemon instead of abandoning it. It may not be a well-known daycare, though all people who actually used their service were highly satisfied with the results. Results being that their Pokemon were brimming with energy and looking incredibly happy. There were only 2 people working there. It may sound overwhelming at first, but considering who one of the 2 is, it is not surprising that the daycare works as well as it does. Additionally, they have their own Pokemon helping out. Ex-champion Kushina Uzumaki and her wife were the founders and owners of the now 10-year-old resort, and they never regretted even a single second of it. Kushina became champion of Sinnoh at the tender age of 16 and retired from the position only 1 year afterwards due to the position taking up most of her time and allowing less time to be spent with her at that time girlfriend. Even though being champion brought in a lot of money, it was not worth it for her if it meant she couldn't spend time with her girlfriend, thus neglecting the love of her life. Of course her girlfriend protested the action, but nothing would ever come between Kushina and her ironclad rule of, family will always come first no matter what, not even her most important person. So after some discussions and ideas, they both decided to settle down and open the PDC. Her wife, being highly talented in the art of healing and tending to Pokemon, was just an added bonus. At the counter of the reception desk in the establishment we find said ex-champion eagerly waiting for a certain someone to arrive. Kushina is a gorgeous woman with ankle-length, red hair representing her fiery personality and passion perfectly. It framed both sides of her face and was parted to the left with a black hair clip, a gift from her wife. She had a slender yet feminine build that only enhanced her already divine beauty. Her skin was fair, though it had a light tan from working outside and traveling for most of her youth. Violet eyes panned down and looked over herself, checking the outfit she was wearing. A long, green, loose-fitting dress over a sleeveless, high-collared, white blouse. At the moment she was tending to the counter with a friendly smile on her face, fixing her hair every few minutes in anticipation. After all, her wife is coming back today. 3 days without her feel like so long. Lamented Kushina in her mind, at least she will be back soon. Her wife went on a small business trip to Kalos for some eggs she wanted to hatch back in Sinnoh, to add a bit more color and joy into their little paradise they created a couple years back. She also needed to visit certain Pokemon professors to get 2 little munchkins special gifts for their journey. Good thing she didn't have to take the ever so long route via ship and could just fly over to Kalos. I really want to fly on her Altaria again soon. She is so fluffy and cuddly. You could fly all day without stopping once, Kushina mused to herself. Kushina's thoughts were cut off when the door swung open and consequently ringing the bell hanging above it. Perking up at the sound and looking towards the entrance, her face broke into the happiest smile you will ever see and her cheeks took on a slightly rosy hue. There in the doorway of their Pokemon daycare stood her beautiful wife, Cheryl Uzumaki. Cheryl, like Kushina, looked so beautiful it was simply otherworldly. Her normally calf-length, emerald green hair was weaved into a single thick braid going over her right shoulder to the front and stopping just short of her thighs. It parted in front of her face to both sides in the shape of 2 leaves with a single fringe hanging over her cute button nose. Cheryl possessed a similar build as Kushina's own, her dress and small cardigan giving her a timid but incredibly loving aura. Unlike Kushina, however, who was widely known for her burning passion that could ignite everyone's inner fire and her outspokenness, Cheryl was timid and soft-spoken, though no less determined than her wife. Cheryl supported Kushina for most of her journey and was with her through thick and thin with her, always there to catch her if she ever fell. The dress went down to her shins and was the same color as her hair except for the part that covered her torso, which was dark brown with vertical lines. It didn't cover her arms or shoulders though, that was what the grass green cardigan was for, which she always wore over the dress. After taking off her brown leather boots, she turned to the counter and saw a practically glowing Kushina looking at her with a radiant smile. Cheryl smiled back and exclaimed with as much love as she could muster, "I'm back, love." Not a second after those words left her lips, she saw Kushina running towards her. They embraced and gave each other a long loving kiss, showing just how much they care about each other. "I missed you, Cheryl," whispered Kushina, with her forehead leaning against Cheryl's and lips just inches away from her own. After giving Kushina another quick peck on the lips, Cheryl breathed back, "I missed you too. I couldn't stop thinking about the two of you even for a single second." Kushina's smile only brightened after hearing her wife's words. "He was asking the whole time when his mama would be back home again," she told her, amused. They suddenly heard footsteps from above and saw a small yellow blur rushing down the stairs. A grinning Kushina turned towards the blur with a small grin and softly muttered, "Speak of the devil and he shall appear." Cheryl was already on one knee with open arms waiting for the inevitable. The blur jumped into her arms and revealed itself to be a small boy in a plain white t-shirt and black shorts, looking to be around 7 or 8 years old. The boy had spiky, blonde, chin-length hair poking in all possible directions and the same emerald eyes as Cheryl. After being caught in her arms, the boy hugged her around neck and nuzzled his cheek against hers. "You're back, Mama," the now revealed son of Kushina and Cheryl exclaimed, full of happiness. Gladly returning the hug, Cheryl smiled at his affectionate gesture and ran her fingers through his golden hair. "Hello, Naruto. How was my little sunshine while I was away?" She accentuated her statement with a small kiss on his cheek and a heartfelt smile. "I bet you had lots of fun with Mommy." He gave her a big kiss onto her right cheek. "It was lots of fun and I learned tons of new things." Slowly standing up again with Naruto still in her arms, she walked over to Kushina and nudged her towards their living room, which was one of the rooms in the hallway that was directly behind the counter. Not many people came to the PDC at this time of the day, so it was fine to leave the counter unattended for a while, and even if someone needed anything they can just ring the bell at the reception. After the family settled down on the couch with Kushina and Cheryl being on the left and right side of Naruto respectively, Naruto told Cheryl about how Kushina recounted some of their own adventures and gave him advice for his own journey in a couple years. Her advice ranging from the most basic survival tips all the way to how to properly treat and train not only your Pokemon but also yourself. He also exclaimed how fun it was playing with all the Pokemon on the different artificial simulated biomes and resorts their PDC has to offer. A small lake for water types and Pokemon who like to swim in general. Little patches of trees and even small forests providing protection from the sun and accommodating various bug and grass type Pokemon. Huge fields for the more battle-lusty Pokemon to spar without interruption or if they just want to run around feeling the wind across their fur scales. Naruto always got along well with any type of Pokemon. It originally started off with only his mother's Pokemon and from there stemmed off into all kinds of Pokemon. Be they trained or wild, all of them simply loved the little bundle of energy. Even the most vicious-looking Pokemon turned soft at the sight of him. It was not only him though. His best friend had the same effect on Pokemon. He gotten to know her when he was only 1 or 2 years old and they had been inseparable ever since. They met one another when Kushina took him with her to Professor Carolina in Celestic Town, where she learned more about Pokemon care, new discoveries from other regions, and sometimes borrows books on legendary Pokemon to read to Naruto. She still visits the professor from time to time. Such a trip took no time at all, especially if you have a champion-level Salamence in your possession. Even if Cheryl was the one who wanted to visit the Celestic Town Historical Research Center, it takes no less time on her Altaria. There Naruto met Professor Carolina's granddaughter who was around the same age as him. Without anyone even saying anything they began playing together like they were already best of friends. From that day on they would try to convince their mothers and grandmother respectively to go meet the other as often as possible, even going so far as to using their secret weapon over and over again. Big watery eyes and a quivering lip. That always seemed to work. And then Mommy's Tyranitar put me on his head and we walked all over the place. That was so cool. I love it when he does that. Naruto told Cheryl, concluding his recap of exciting and interesting stuff he did with Kushina in her absence. Cheryl just smiled at him with closed eyes and ruffled his hair while saying, "That sure sounds like you had a lot of fun. If you want we can fly with Altaria sometime again. I bet she would like to see you too." Naruto beamed at that possibility. "Of course. I would love to fly with you and Altaria again. She is just so nice, soft, and fluffy, and you're awesome too, Mama," he replied overly excited. So you don't want to fly with your mommy and her cool salamence anymore? Kushina exclaimed, holding the back of her hand against her forehead in mock hurt. Seeing this, Cheryl giggled softly into her hand and watched Naruto's panic-stricken face with amusement. His eyes widened comically and started flailing around with his arms chanting apologies. No. I love you mommy and I find your salamence super cool too. It was just quite a while ago since I last flew together with mama. Please don't be sad mommy, explained a teary-eyed Naruto frantically while hugging Kushina fiercely. Kushina couldn't hold it in any longer, it was just too cute. And hugged back just as fiercely. I could never be sad with you around my little baby boy. I was just messing with you a little, she proclaimed while burying her face into his hair and started tickling him.
Of course he burst out laughing under the relentless tickle attack by Kushina. Wiggling out of her grasp a little, he started tickling her back and soon they were both rolling around the couch laughing. Somewhere in between they got Cheryl involved too, who was now under combined assault of Naruto and Kushina.
After 10 minutes the laughing settled down to peaceful silence, only to be interrupted by Kushina asking, "So do you want to come with me and Naruto to Celestic Town, or would you rather stay here and rest after your trip?" Cheryl. She smiled apologetically. "I'm quite exhausted after so much traveling. I shall join you too the next time you visit her and would like to rest for today."
He immediately perked up at his name and the mentioning of Celestic Town in one sentence, though deflated a bit after hearing that Cheryl won't be coming. However, knowing that his mother will join them next time lifted his spirits again. Stars appeared in his eyes and he started bouncing around on the couch with energy only an 8-year-old who is about to meet his best friend can have. "We are visiting Canyon Cyn and Grandma. Awesome," he shouted while doing cartwheels.
"Yes. I wanted to ask her about some important things. You and little Cynthia can continue reading the books about the Weather Trio of Hoenn and Creation Trio of Sinnoh you started last time.
I can't wait to continue reading it with Canyon. There is so much stuff to read about them and even more stuff to discover on our own. Not to mention all the awesome adventures we will have after we start our journey."
Cheryl and Kushina were glad he was able to find someone he can trust unconditionally so early on in his life. Adding the fact that they liked the same things only made it better. The mothers hoped those feelings won't change anytime soon. A certain grandmother was of the same mind. "Now before even thinking about your journey, there's still much for you two to learn." However, she was interrupted by Naruto before she could finish her lecture. "Being prepared for all kinds of situations is super important. I know mama. After all I learned from the best," he proclaimed with puffed out chest and a lot of pride. "That's right young man, and we will teach and train both of you to be more than ready, and that includes making dinner. So how about you go with us into the kitchen and prepare lunch together with your awesome mothers? What do you say?" Kushina asked her little family. Unanimously agreeing, they then made their way towards the door with Naruto still between them holding both their hands leading them to the kitchen. He started helping in the kitchen when he was 5 and had continued to do so ever since. Sometimes even making small things like cookies by himself to surprise them and ice cream for Cynthia because she loves ice cream. Loves ice cream. It is borderline worship, but that just makes her even cuter. That is also why he likes to make ice cream for her. Her eyes always start to sparkle and a cute little smile spreads on her face at the sight of ice cream. The flavor doesn't even matter as long as it is cold, sweet ice cream goodness. Back in the kitchen, they just finished making some rice with a couple side dishes and were now preparing the table for lunch. As soon as lunch was finished, the mother-son duo went to prepare themselves for their little trip. It was now early afternoon and they were about to take off on salamence toward Celestic Town, who was enjoying head pats from Naruto, growling in content. Kissing Naruto on his forehead and Kushina on the lips, Cheryl waved them goodbye. "Have a safe trip you two and have fun." Waving back, they both shot her a big grin. "Thanks. See you later," they shouted in unison. "Okay salamence. Let's head to Celestic Town." After hearing his master's command, salamence roared once and shot off into the air at unbelievable speeds. Soon enough the only thing you could see of them was a speck in the horizon. Cheryl's gaze lingered a little longer after they took off before turning around and closing the PDC to get some rest. She reminded herself to wrap up and hide the presents she got in Kalos for the two children. First up though was saying hello to the Pokemon she left behind and getting some sleep in her and Kushina's bed. Celestic Town. Historical Research Center. The day started like any other for a certain blonde girl. Waking up, doing all kind of things in the bathroom, cook breakfast and getting ready for the day. She and her grandmother were living together at the research center owned by said grandmother. Like the name implies, they research the historical and legendary Pokemon of Sinnoh and events that may be connected to them. The center encompasses multiple buildings including their home, it being a little, wooden two-story house. We now find her in her room sitting in front of a mirror, brushing her mid-thigh length blonde hair. This girl was Cynthia Carolina, granddaughter of Professor Carolina and Naruto's best friend. Cynthia is a petite girl with long, flowing blonde hair which framed both sides of her face with a single bang going over the left half of her face, blocking the eye from view. She was wearing a white sundress together with her ever-present black and yellow hair clips, each looking like a pair of Umbreon ears. They were her absolute favorites. She received them on her 4th birthday as a handmade present from Naruto. Narrow, gray eyes were practically glowing with happiness. After all, her grandma told her yesterday that he and his mother Kushina would come over to play today. It's been already a couple of days since I last saw Ruto. She thought to herself, today we can finally continue reading that book about those legendary Pokemon. The thought alone brought a happy smile to her face. Finishing up with her hair, she stood up and took one last look at herself in the mirror before going downstairs to have breakfast with her grandma. Morning, Grandma. I hope you like what I made, she exclaimed joyfully and sat down at the table her grandmother was already occupying. Professor Carolina was an elderly woman with neck-length gray blonde hair cut in a bob-like fashion. She had the same gray eyes as Cynthia, just not as narrow. True to her title, she was wearing a long white lab coat over a pink shirt and brown capri pants. Her grandmother could only smile at her good mood. I always love the food you make for breakfast. You will be an excellent cook someday if you continue improving like this. I also noticed you are a lot happier today than you were the past few days. Is there any particular reason for it? She teasingly added with a sly smile. Even though she already knew the answer, it was always cute seeing her granddaughter's expressions. You know why I'm so happy, she said, pouting. My bestest best friend is coming over again today. He couldn't come over for so long. She emphasized it by making a big archway gesture with her little arms. 4 days isn't that long, sweetie, an amused professor replied. That statement brought back the pout full force. These 4 days felt like ages. Stressing the last word and puffing up her cheeks, though her mood suddenly made a complete turnaround when she thought about one particular thing she missed nearly as much as her best friend himself. His ice cream. When he gets here we will make that wondertastic ice cream as soon as possible, she thought to herself with stars appearing in her eyes and drool starting to escape her slightly agape mouth. Are you thinking about ice cream again? Her grandmother asked, amused. Honestly, you can cook so well yet nearly destroy the kitchen when trying to make some by yourself. I don't even know how you nearly started a fire while making ice cream. By now the professor was laughing jovially and Cynthia just turned beet red from embarrassment. It wasn't her fault the sugar started smoking out of nowhere, right? Stupid granny. I bet it was the stove's fault. 5 times in a row, she grumbled to herself. A tiny rain cloud followed her depressing thoughts and started pouring over her despondent figure. The other person occupying the room only laughed louder at her cute granddaughter. The granddaughter who was able to befriend the most violent Pokemon and conjure marvelous meals yet fails at the mundane task of making ice cream. Before the situation could get any more out of control, Cynthia's control that is, they both heard a distant roar from outside. Cynthia immediately perked up at this, her short bout of depression all but forgotten. I could never forget this sound. The sound of an incoming red-haired mother and my best friend. My best friend who can make awesome ice cream, she secretly and silently added to her previous thoughts while nodding to herself. Not that anyone can read her mind to begin with. At least no one that was here at the moment, she hoped. She rushed past her still smiling grandmother like a Garchomp using Dragon Rush. Fortunately her little Dragon Rush was perfectly accurate unlike the actual attack. Tunnel vision sure must be inconvenient. Putting on a pair of white sandals, she yanked open the door as fast as possible and ran out without even closing the door. Who cares about an open door if your best friend finally comes over to play after yay? It were only 4 days though. Fine 4 days then. Still super long. Pushing the fact that her grandma somehow knew exactly what she was thinking deep into some unused corner of her colorful mind, she came to an abrupt stop and gazed at the direction the roar came from. Squinting her eyes a little, trying to see even a teensy bit more, she finally saw a blue and red dragon approaching at what looked like supersonic speed if the sonic boom was anything to go by. The color scheme alone told you it was a Salamence, no doubt. Not many dragon-like Pokemon can fly such high speeds and even less match the coloring. It was by no means an ordinary one though. Its normally separate wings were merged into a single enormous, crescent-shaped wing, looking like it could cut through anything in its way. The once shelled underbelly was transformed into a vest-like armor, encasing its chest and shoulders, though the once just as armored lower jaw was now free and exposing the red flesh they laid underneath, thus streamlining its body even further. Finally, the tail was noticeably shorter and the middle and upper pair of head fins elongated. The middle pair now spanning over towards the bridge of the nose, while the upper pair grew in length and became cuspidal. This was Kashina's Mega Salamence, her first and strongest Pokemon. Considered to be one of the most powerful Salamence to have ever existed, even rivaling some legendaries in terms of raw power alone. At first glance you would only notice the above-average height and slightly more defined muscle structure. After seeing him in active combat even once, however, one would change their opinion as fast as a wild Abra would teleport away, and that is without even needing to Mega Evolve. Kashina only received the Key Stone together with the Mega Stone after visiting Kalos together with Cheryl for some vacation, and to this date there were only a couple of trainers who could actually push her enough to even consider using it in battle. Seeing the majestic Pokemon, Cynthia gained a determined glint in her eyes and swore an oath to herself. One day I will have my own awesome dragon and then I will beat you, Auntie Kashina. Not a minute longer and one could make out the passengers on top flying with Salamence. The one standing out the most being Kashina with her mile-long hair floating gorgeously in the wind. Sitting right in front of her was Naruto holding onto Salamence while looking incredibly entertained. Both looking like they were having the time of their life while flying over the landscape. As soon as she saw Naruto looking into her general direction, she started waving with both of her arms while jumping up and down in excitement. A couple minutes earlier, "That was so awesome, mommy. I didn't know Salamence can Mega Evolve while flying with us here," Naruto shouted over the rushing winds. Nuzzling his cheek with her own, she replied, "Of course he can do that. We are just awesome like that." He started nuzzling right back with a happy smile plastered on his face. "Yay, all of your Pokemon are awesome. Mama's Pokemon too. Both of you are the awesomest." "Ah. Thank you, and you are the awesomest for both of us too," she responded and started to hug the life out of him. Naruto suddenly pointed downwards in the direction they were traveling and exclaimed excitedly, "Look! It's Cyn. Let's wave back." She could only grin in amusement at his eagerness to see little Cynthia and complied with his request. Seeing them waving back only made her continue flailing her arms around with even more fervor. She was practically glowing with happiness and excitement at this point.
She didn't even notice her grandmother that now stood only a couple steps behind her, playfully shaking her head at her normally composed granddaughter's behavior at the prospect of spending the day together with Naruto and meeting her Auntie Kashina again.
Even though she hoped Auntie Cheryl would come too, but she will meet her soon again anyway when going over to play at their house. Growing up without parents wasn't nearly as bad as it could be. Having her grandma, her aunts she wasn't actually related to, and Naruto while growing up more than made up for that. "And one day I will make my own little family." The sound of something landing and the subsequent wind generated by said landing rattled her awake, and she pushed back the picture of her as a young adult leaning on an older-looking Naruto with a blonde girl with emerald eyes on his shoulders for later. Clambering off hastily, Naruto took off as soon as he hit the ground and ran directly towards Cynthia. He was not the only one eagerly running though. Cynthia took no less time to start sprinting in his direction. "Ruto. Cyn." After greeting each other by shouting each other's names, they started jumping and spinning around excitedly while holding onto each other's arms. "These 4 days felt so long without you. It was so boring," she lamented, overdramatized. He only nodded his head in understanding. "They sure felt like ages, right? Even if my mum taught me lots of stuff and there were Pokemon around, playing with you is still the best," he proclaimed happily. Cynthia blushed a little at his heartfelt confession. "I know exactly what you mean. Grandma is awesome and messing with the researchers can be fun, but nothing can beat playing together with your best friend," she proclaimed while nodding sagely. Off to the side we find Professor Carolina and Kashina observing the little reunion with loving eyes and small smiles. These two children really were made for each other. When seeing these moments I can't thank modern science and medicine enough. A lone tear of happiness slid down her right cheek. Cheryl and me will be forever grateful for that. Were it not for that, this all would not have been possible, she finished with a voice full of emotions. I can still remember the day you and Cheryl came to me asking whether I knew of a method for you two to have a child the natural way. You were so relieved and joyful when I said yes, the professor replied nostalgically. The method mentioned is a complicated procedure that involves artificial insemination, altering the sperm with medically impossible sounding treatments so the child will inherit features of both mothers instead of only one by working in the DNA of the other woman. This was made possible thanks to highly advanced medical equipment and extensive research pertaining this particular field of science. Even though it is impossible to completely erase all traits belonging to the donor, it was no problem for Kashina and Cheryl. His blonde hair looked beautiful and went well together with Cheryl's emerald green eyes and Kashina's slightly rounded face. It was obvious he inherited his hair from the donor. Neither Kashina nor Cheryl had anything remotely close to blonde hair themselves. Same goes for both of their family members. Kashina's smile only brightened at that particular memory, exclaiming, "Of course we would be happy. It was our chance to complete our small paradise and we grasped that opportunity as soon as it was within our reach. We didn't regret it then and we won't start now." Finishing passionately with a grabbing gesture and a fist pump right after, she settled back to watching the children. She sweat dropped at the scene she was witnessing. A starry-eyed Cynthia with drooling mouth dragging a smiling Naruto towards the house and probably the kitchen if Cynthia's expression is anything to go by. Professor Carolina looked on highly amused by the unique relationship, though suddenly took a thinking pose for a second before asking Kashina a question she forgot to ask for the past 7 years. "How did you two decide on who would carry your child? I know in the end it was Cheryl. I'm curious on what made you choose her, no offense." A small smile appeared on Kashina's face after hearing her question. "None taken. I already asked myself when someone would ask that," she remarked amused. "It wasn't really a hard decision to be honest. If you just take one look at Cheryl, what words would you use to describe her?" Thinking for a second, the professor replied, "Kind, caring, beautiful, reliable and incredibly loving," before realizing what Kashina was aiming for. "The perfect mother," they said at the same time. "Exactly. I know she would be a mother regardless of who will carry little Naruto. When she asked me why I want her to do it, I told her that she was always there for me throughout our journey together even though we met as total strangers. We went through thick and thin together. I could only recklessly run head first into all those adventures because I knew she would be there to catch me if I fell." Chuckling to herself she continued, "Quite selfish, right? Some may say I told her to carry the baby because I'm selfish and don't want to go through the hassle and pain of childbirth. Others may claim I don't love her enough to carry our child." Realizing how egoistic I was during our travels, I decided that I wanted to show her that I will be there for her just as much as she was for me. I wanted her to see that I loved her just as much as she does me. The truth is that I would have loved to be the one to be pregnant, but I also wanted to give something back to Cheryl after all the times I took her for granted. It was not out of guilt or any kind of imaginary debt. It was out of unconditional love that I wanted for Cheryl to experience the joy of giving birth to our child. After hearing Kashina's little story, Professor Carolina couldn't help but smile. "What a wonderful story. This only reaffirms me in my belief of you two being the paragon of perfection every couple should strive for." Blushing at the compliment, Kashina held her rosy cheeks and swayed a little from side to side with her eyes closed. "Oh, stop that. We are just a young couple of women deeply in love with each other. Everyone would do that if they were in our situation," she replied bashfully. "Anyway, we should probably check up on the children. I don't want to have Cynthia near a stove with any sugar nearby," the elderly woman suggested with a hearty laugh. "That is probably a good idea. I still can't understand how you nearly set a kitchen on fire while making ice cream," Kashina remarked with a bemused smile. The only reply she got was a short, "Children," accompanied by a closed-eyed shrug. Arriving in the kitchen, they found 2 blonde-haired children happily eating ice cream. Naruto was eating what looked like strawberry-flavored ice cream and Cynthia was enjoying her favorite, chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. Noticing they were not alone anymore, they turned towards the doorway and saw 2 adults smiling at them. "Hey mommy and grandma," exclaimed Naruto while running over to them and giving his self-proclaimed grandma a big hug. In the meantime, Cynthia ran over to Kashina and gave her the same treatment. Smiling down at the little up-and-coming pâtissier, she ruffled his hair a little. "How are you, little munchkin? I see you made ice cream again. Did Cynthia say thank you to you for making her favorite, even if it takes longer?" she asked with a friendly smile.
Couldn't be any better. After all, I can finally play together with Canyon again. He proclaimed with a toothy grin and squinted eyes. Yay, she did say thanks. Even if she didn't say thanks, I would still make ice cream for her. After all, she is my bestest best friend. It didn't take much longer anyway. I prepared most of the stuff at home already.
Before she could respond, he ran off to the freezer, took out a little plastic container, ran back and held it towards her. Here, I made some ice cream for you too. This time it's coffee.
Taking the small container from his hands, she thanked him and ruffled his hair one last time before excusing herself because she still had work to do for the day. Saying their goodbyes, they started going to Cynthia's room together with Kushina. So who wants to read books about Hoenns and Sinnoh's legendary trios? The only answer she got was her being dragged to Cynthia's room even faster. This is it for today. To be continued.